Penance Brand of Dissipation is by far my favorite bossing build I have ever played. And to be completely honest, it's really not even close. The playstyle is literally perfect for bossing. The skill lasts 8 seconds. So you put your 2 brands on them, cast your curses, and for 7 seconds, just run away and take a bite of your Hot Pocket, wipe your ass, wash your hands afterwards, you dirty little man. Come back and check on the carnage that you left in this wasteland. The other part is that it's 100% uptime because we're a Hierophant, and trust me, when the brands are going to expire, it looks like this and you can't miss it. When this happens, just put the 2 brands back on them, and the second those are expired, these ones will replace it. And there you go. You have 100% uptime and you go back to dodging again. Crazy thing is that this skill has been nerfed repeatedly. It was even nerfed a little bit, a tiny little like 1% nerf this patch, and yet I was still able to get the POB to 20 million damage. So this is your disclaimer, this is the warning. That 20 million damage is true, that is not bait. It is, however, for 2 seconds. Before that, it would be 10 million. The footage in the background is half of that potential. That version is only maxing out at 10 million DPS. So his average is significantly lower, around that 7 to 8 million range. Because we have so much downtime, he is a double cursor, so he is using punishment. Punishment is 59% more damage. I do have a calculation where you can average the damage for punishment. Just go ahead and turn off enemies on low life. The other thing you need to know is why it ramps so much and why Hierophant is my favorite ascendancy for brands. Penance Brand of Dissipation specifically, this is only relevant to it, is a heavy ramping skill. It sucks your cast speed down. To try to simplify it, it gets to 20 stacks. You get a lot of cast speed, you get to 20 stacks very fast. You increase the duration of the brand, and now that skill is at 20 stacks for a long time. Then Hierophant kicks in, and it takes the last 25% of the duration of that brand and doubles its cast time. So basically, get to 10 million damage with a lot of cast speed, Hierophant kicks in for 2 seconds with the duration we have on our brand, and it goes to 20 million. For the average damage, you would, cut that in half, and it would maybe be closer to around 15 million. But PoE is complicated, and there's situations and things like that that happen. What I do know is that character in the background has half of that damage, and that still felt plenty good to dumpster every guardian in the game. Dumpster Maven, no problem. So I am more than fine with that level of gear. That particular character though was held together by sticks, stones, garbage, and glue, all from standard. So his defenses were trash, but the damage was simulated. I would not want to heavy map with this character though, so this is the other problem. I did advertise this as a bosser. It is not the strongest mapper, especially the first time you actually get Penance Brand on. You need a lot of cast speed, so that's why I'm going to recommend that we're going dual wield. We're going to get a lot of cast speed stuff, and it'll make it feel okay. Unlike most skills, you're going to actually have the opposite problem, where you're going to be killing bosses very easy, but for mapping, you actually have to gem swap to map a little bit better. You're going to take a gem called Swift Brand and Conk Effect and swap them for whatever you need. Conk Effect's better for bossing, Swift Brand's better for mapping. The low end and the mid tier versions of this character are dirt cheap. No uniques, no nothing, no enlightens, absolutely nothing at all. Just some generic rare gear and a skill that still just does too much fucking damage. Speaking of the skill, last thing you should know is that on day 1 and day 2, lastly, hardcore and softcore for once, same price, 5C, 10C. Very affordable, very doable. We're in the melee league, so I imagine a lot of people are not going to be playing this skill. Now, real quick, for leveling, there's a ton of options. You're a Templar and you can use brands. You have infinite options. So for me, because I am the kind of person who will spend an hour and a half in the Elden Ring character creator, I'm a theme person. So I wanted to do lightning theme. So I leveled with Storm brands and it was perfectly fine. Unlike Armageddon brand cremation, it's just 1 4-link. So easier to do, but the damage did start to fall off when I hit tier 8 maps. Ideally, you would have swapped by then, but it's up to you, bud. Multiple trees, multiple ways to level. That's how you know a certain starting class is a bit too strong. So enough of this. Let's just get to the POB now. All right, it's 4:08 a.m., so I have to be a little bit quiet, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm having to re-record this, so my voice is dying a bit too. I'm gonna do my best. One thing I did not mention so far, and the biggest reason is because, well, if you want the honest truth, is most people click off the video once you get to the POB part. So I guess this is still secret information for you, bud. They're adding specters back into the game, so yes, we have 20.2 million damage, but what if I told you with the specters they added, we would actually go to 24 million. Average damage would now almost be 14 to 15 million damage, and, well, I don't care how tanky a T17 boss is, I know that this is gonna melt him, and I'm getting rich, so if this is in the game, then we win, boys. If it's not in the game, who cares? I plan to run obviously not having it, so it would just be a nice added bonus. The 2 Spectres names will be in the notes section that I at least plan on running. Also with another one, he runs the Grace Aura, which would be nice because we have very little evasion. Obviously we're very tanky in order to take hits, but a little bit of evasion in certain, deep maps would also go a long way. The Wrath Spectre very much would survive, he's not a big deal. And the Marionettes would essentially, kill themselves with a Guardian's Blessing anyway, but they revive once they die. So if you have 2 Marionettes, Guardian's Blessing Wrath, in theory, and it worked in Affliction, would basically give us back Divine Blessing. So we're running 1 set of these Spectres. This POB will probably be updated. Honestly, at this point, you'd have to just go to Twitch and I'd probably mention it or tell you what I did, because I'm probably not going to remember to do that. Like I said before, low life punishment. If you want that off, you want that on, go right here, turn this off. Your average would be 16.7 in this case, but your actual max real hit would be 20.7 once the boss is below half HP. The rest of this calculation is actually fairly straightforward. I already explained the cast speed and stuff, so just make sure you keep your cast rate more or less above 4 or at least around 4, and you'll hit 20 stacks. If it's anywhere around like 2, you're actually not going to hit your max pulses, and this skill is going to feel like absolute fucking shit. Everything is always color coded as usual: Rolling Magma, Armageddon Brand, Cremation, and then Storm Brand. Then you would switch to Penance Brand, mid-tier, early endgame, final version. The skills and everything will align with that. We're not going to go over the early leveling because, well, let's be real. Storm Brand, I will mention. Storm Brand did feel good. If I level as this on League Start, I'm probably playing this. It has a seamless transition. I already did it. I don't have to waste regret points, even though, gold's in the game now. And it should be a fun time. The only thing I will warn you about is that you do not use this for Merville. Switch to Storm Brand after you kill Merville with Magma Ball. After that point, it's very good. Once you get to Herald of Thunder, it's completely fine, no problem. You only use 1 4-link. But both versions will be able to get you to, tier 5, tier 6 maps. You'll be able to make some money, buy your gem, and then you'll switch. Now, switching is very much straightforward. Like I said before, Conk Effect for bosses, Swift Brand for mapping. It's going to be more of a feel thing because it's a little bit based off of your gear and your cast speed, but you'll be able to figure out what I mean when you actually play it. Well, if you play it. Now, initially, we are going to have a cast speed problem. I said that. So go dual wield. These cast speed nodes are very good. They're more valuable, and we actually run out of cast speed to get on the tree, so we kind of have to do something. So I'm going to recommend that you go over here and use just cast speed based wands with some generic cast speed. This helmet's good for suppression. I'm a hardcore player, obviously, so I want suppression as early as possible. Hierophant's endurance charges buff probably means it's not even that needed, but I'll still do it just out of principle. The mid-tier version is where we actually are getting gear. Now, the gear itself is bad. It's not good. +1 with some lightning damage to spells or spell damage will take you pretty much all the way to Maven. You'll dumpster her, move on to the rest of your life. Generic crafts and your implicits, there's really not much to say here because it's just generic suppression. Physical damage reduction is really nice on the chest. Getting some cast speed is really important at this point though, because you want to remove the cast speed on the tree, put it on your gear, and then spend the points on your tree getting things like energized armor, getting your second curse. We're moving stuff around now because we're min-maxing, right? Then you go to the early endgame. Now, the thing about the early endgame is that, mid-tier, there's really no difference. The early endgame uses the same skills. And at this point, I expect you to have some money. You've already gotten your 4 Void Stones. If you're still playing this build, then you need to be ready to spend some money. Your damage will exponentially go up, but so will the cost of everything. Now, I'll explain how to craft all this gear in the final version, but just to give you a general idea, you're switching to a Dawnbreaker. Fizz conversion is obviously removed from the game in most sources, so this will still be our option. In order to use something like Dawnbreaker, we have to be confident we can do a shit ton of damage, and that's why we're using Penance Brand. You have another option here on these implicits. They did add new Fizz damage taken, but as of recording this, they still have not released any info about these. So just keep in mind that you could be even tankier, although if I'm going to be honest, it's very much not needed. Turn off all your flasks and turn off your Molten Shell, and you'll actually be able to still survive a Shaper Slam at 100% power. In my opinion, I don't really need much more tank than that. If I rip, then it's probably me. It's going to not be the build. This gear is probably going to be about day 3, maybe day 4 to me. It really just depends on hardcore if, I can get a Dawnbreaker early. But the rest of the gear is just generic suppression, nothing special. More cast speed, adding +1 to feed the Penance Brand. It loves levels of gems. And as I said before, Divine Flesh Glorious Vanities are always like what I use in most builds. automation studies, I pretty much always try to get this on every glorious vanity. This is the only notable in this area, so it's going to be right here. And then you would add a large cluster, some brand stuff, so we can move off of this brand stuff, and it overall balances out. This will help more clear because the duration and the AoE will overlap when you're using Swift brand. Now the final version. So for the scepter, I will do a brief explanation of these things. They're not so complicated that I think we need to go to Craft of Exile. The rest of this is just harvest juice. The rings and the amulet, you would use blue caster juice to get the cast speed. Cast speed is really important, but that's pretty much it. The reason why the numbers of these are so high is because this is all catalyst. You know, this was expensive for me, but catalyzing when you're wearing gear this expensive is kind of a necessary evil. As you can tell, my voice is dying. Now, let's just do a quick scepter craft. The rest of the stuff is all just suppression, so I figured let's just actually show you how to make this. So, you're going to use Essences of Torment. Ideally, afford what you can. Your goal is pretty much just to look for spell damage or lightning damage. That's it. Find out what you want to settle for. Tier 1 is going to cost you hundreds and hundreds of these. If you're willing to settle for Tier 2, you should find one within about 200. If you're willing to settle for Tier 3, it might be around 100. Now, I've already done this, so I'm just going to plug it in, but it will be about 100. It was about 113 in my first simulation. Okay, so let's assume you hit Tier 2, same as me on my scepter. So now the unfortunate situation is that you would have 2 suffixes. There's no secret here. You just annul. Oh, you hit it? You're gonna have to go again, bud. It's the way it is. So you would just keep trying to do this until you finally clear the suffix, and now the scepter is done. Now it's just a money sink. Prefixes cannot be changed. Scour, that will keep the 3 prefixes. Obviously one of those was fractured, so it wouldn't even have mattered. Can have up to 3, and your highest damage supports are going to be double damage and cast speed. There you go, the scepter is done. Obviously this is expensive, but it's at least deterministic. The last thing I think I would say is the base, as long as it's at least 30% plus elemental damage, I would consider it, but anything less than that, if you're planning on wearing the scepter for a long time, I wouldn't really consider. 6 all pen is also pretty good. They're pretty comparable, 6% and 40%, just depends on your POV. Now, the biggest reason we're going Incandescent Heart is because we end up at, more damage because we're going for a +2. Now, obviously you can go for double +2, and this would go to 24 million damage. And if you had the Spectre, you'd go to 28 to 30 million damage. And you would literally have pre-nerf DPS of Penance Brand of Dissipation, and that would one-shot every single thing in the entire game. Obviously, we can dream. This is about the limit I'm willing to spend and, craft. For my gear, you need perfect suppression for this version because Dawnbreaker is taking away a suppression roll. So Incandescent Heart makes us tankier. Our fizz hit will go down a little bit from the last version, but the LE hit and the balance, I think, is worth it. Once you do this much damage, most things should die before they really, really hit you. The rest of the gear is fixing your implicits, getting your suppression capped right here. You have to drop LE exposure, lightning exposure, I believe. Yeah, you have to drop lightning exposure on the gloves, but obviously the damage is more than enough worth it. The rest of the gear is actually mostly the same as the last set. Not too different. The Watcher's Eye, you go ahead and add a Wrath Watcher's Eye. You can obviously look for different ones, double Watcher's Eyes. This was actually the cheapest one I had in hardcore. It's not that good. The roll's pretty bad, but it gets the job done. Outside of that, you need to add this small cluster to cap our suppression. But like I said, it's one of those things where you actually gain so much damage that you can give up points to do things like this, and it still ends up being worth it. That's how busted plus levels the gems are. Now, hopefully this is good enough for you. My voice is dying. Sorry. Have a good one. Good luck. Hopefully League's good.